Do you remember the first time you saw your mom? Do you remember the first time you were carried out of the hospital, your first meal, your first toy, or the moment you stood up on your tiny little legs all by yourself? No, right? Weird, because those were all first moments in your own life. Your parents remember them, your grandparents remember them, but you, the main character, are just completely blank. Most people think the answer is very simple. Your brain just wasn't ready yet. You were too little. But that is not completely true, and the real answer is much stranger than you might think. A newborn baby's brain can learn. It can recognize sounds. It quietly recorded more than you realize. So, if your brain really did record those things, why can't you find them anymore later on? Welcome back to Simplify Psychology. Let's follow the trail of those lost early life memories and unlock the mystery. Why you can't remember being a baby. In psychology, this huge memory gap is called infantile amnesia. Most of us, no matter how hard we try to rack our brains, cannot remember any events that happened before we were 3 or 4 years old. The few rare, blurry pieces of memory that remain are usually broken, like photos that are smudged and missing corners. The psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud once proposed a very famous theory in the last century. He believed that we did not actually forget those memories, but that we were repressing them because infancy was filled with emotions and psychological conflicts that were too complex, forcing the brain to automatically hide them away to protect the mind. However, from the perspective of modern neuroscience and behavioral psychology, this theory no longer holds up. The truth is, a newborn baby's memory system is not broken. It starts working from the very first days. Look at one very clear piece of evidence from the 1980s. Psychologist Carolyn Rowe Collier carried out an experiment to see whether babies who could not talk yet were able to store information. She placed 2-month-old and 6-month-old babies in cribs. Then she took a ribbon, gently tied one end to the baby's ankle, and connected the other end to a system of toys hanging above them. Kids are always curious. When they moved by accident, their legs pulled the ribbon, making the toy shake and make sounds. In a very short time, the baby's brains figured out the cause and effect rule. Oh, if I kick my leg, that colorful thing moves. And just like that, they got extremely excited, kicking their legs again and again to create their own little fun. The key point of the experiment came a few days later, when Carolyn brought these babies back to the same crib. This time, she did not tie the ribbon to their legs at all. What happened? As soon as they saw the familiar toy system, the babies started kicking their legs non-stop. They remembered. Even a 2-month-old baby can remember an event and keep it in mind for several days. For 6-month-old babies, they can remember that rule for several weeks. Your brain when you were a newborn was fully able to learn, store information, and retrieve it again. It was a little machine working incredibly hard. So if the ability to remember existed that early, where did those memories go as we grew up? To get the answer, we have to go deep into the hardware inside your head. Imagine your brain as a computer system. When you experience something, for example, you take a walk in the rain or you see a dog, that information is sent to a part deep inside the brain called the hippocampus. You can think of the hippocampus as the computer's save button, or its RAM. It is responsible for receiving new data and holding on to it in the short term. In newborn babies, this save button is already fairly well developed from birth. That is why babies can remember that kicking their legs makes the toy shake. But if you want data to stay on a computer for 10 years, 20 years, you cannot just leave it sitting on the desktop. You need to move it into the hard drive, give it a name, and create a clear folder. What is this file about? Where did it happen? And when did it happen? In the human brain, the part responsible for this packaging and labeling process is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where the brain creates what scientists call episodic memory. Episodic memory is the ability to remember a story with a proper context. For example, When I was 7 years old, I fell off my bike in front of the school gate, and a friend helped me up. And here's the problem. The prefrontal cortex is the slowest developing part of the entire human body. It takes more than 20 years to truly mature. When you are still a baby, this folder sorting system is barely working. What does that lead to? It means that when you are little, you can remember skills like how to crawl or how to hold a milk bottle. You can recognize things like, this is mom and that is a dog. But your brain is not yet able to attach context, emotion, and time to those images and turn them into an event. Without help from the prefrontal cortex, your earliest experiences are like short video clips with no names, no dates, floating around in a messy pile inside the brain. And of course, data that is not sorted is very easy to lose. But an unfinished brain structure only explains why memories were not stored well. It does not explain why they disappeared completely. Actually, there is a second mechanism actively erasing your memories. Let's keep using the image of a computer hard drive. Any hard drive, no matter how good it is, has a certain storage limit. The space inside your skull is limited, and the number of brain cells is also limited at any given time. In the first years of life, you are the fastest learning creature on the planet. You have to learn how to understand 3D space, how to control your muscles, keep your balance, walk, grab things, and thousands of other basic survival rules. To handle this massive workload, your brain keeps producing new neurons at an explosive speed. This process is called neurogenesis. In 2014, two researchers, Sheena Joslin and Paul Franklin, proposed a shocking explanation. They found that this intense wave of neurogenesis itself was the culprit destroying your memories. The reason is very simple. When a large number of new brain cells are constantly being created and pushing their way into the existing nervous system, they need space to fit in. These new cells have to disturb, overwrite, and even break old neural connections. The very connections that are holding your memories. To put it bluntly, your brain is constantly scanning through the data and judging which one is more important. The skill of keeping your balance so you can learn to walk, or the blurry memory of yesterday when you crawled around the garden and tried to chew on a tulip. Obviously, the brain will prioritize survival. It decides that the tulip memory is junk data, not essential. So it cleans it up, deleting that memory to make room on the hard drive for new neurons to do their work. Scientists proved this through experiments on mice. They linked one area of a cage with a mild electric shock. When a mouse stepped into that area, it got a light shock and would remember not to go back there next time. Then they interfered with the mouse's brain cell production process. When they used drugs to slow down the creation of new cells, the mice formed very strong memories and remembered the dangerous area for a long time. But on the other hand, when they sped up the creation of new brain cells to a high level, the mice suddenly became forgetful. The memory of the electric shock faded, and they happily wandered back into that dangerous area. So what is the conclusion here? Babies have their memories erased more than adults because that is the stage when the brain creates new cells most intensely. Childhood forgetting is not a mistake or a weakness. It is a perfect evolutionary mechanism. Your brain has to tear down old data to make space for building a more complex survival system. We now understand the biological mechanism behind memory loss. But from the perspective of behavioral psychology, there is another piece of the puzzle that is even more important, a piece that shapes your very existence. Think about any memory you have. You remember your graduation day. In that memory, there are friends, teachers, sunlight, but most importantly, there is one main character. That memory is seen through your lens, told by the voice inside your head. Science calls this autobiographical memory. And to have autobiographical memory, you have to meet one condition that seems obvious but is incredibly deep. You have to know who you are. You have to have a personal awareness, an independent I, separate from the rest of the world. You have to know that you are your own being, not an extension of your mother or the crib. The problem is, newborn babies do not have this I yet. In the first months of life, a child's mind is in a state of total blending with the surrounding environment. To test when personal awareness appears, psychologists have used a method called the mirror test. They secretly put a red mark on a baby's nose, then place the baby in front of a large mirror. For babies under 18 months old, when they look in the mirror, they react by reaching out, patting the glass, or laughing and playing with the reflection. Why? Because their brain thinks, oh, there is another baby sitting across from me. They have no idea that it is their own face. But once they pass the 18 to 24 month stage, a magical psychological shift happens. The baby looks in the mirror and their eyes pause when they see the red mark. And instead of reaching out to touch the glass, the baby frowns and raises a hand to touch their own real nose. The moment that tiny finger touches the nose, that is when the I is officially born. That is the first establishment of personal autonomy in a human life. The child realizes this body is mine. I exist. And it is no accident that the appearance of this self-awareness lines up almost perfectly with the time when our earliest memories can start to be stored. You cannot remember events before age 2 simply because at that time there was no narrator inside your head to write them down. In fact, some studies show that when children are 4 or 5 years old, if you tell them exactly what they did when they were 2, many of them will shake their heads and say, "That wasn't me, that was someone else." The truth is that child is not lying. Psychology sees the stage before the I as a completely different state of existence. But there is still one more piece of the puzzle: language. Psychologists realize that we do not use language only to communicate. We use language to package and organize our own thoughts. Let's go back to how a baby who cannot talk yet takes in the world. Their experience is made entirely of raw sensory impressions. For example, the baby moves into a new house. What they receive is the feeling of cool air, the image of a big blue door, and a large tree in the yard. But because they have no vocabulary, those images and feelings have nothing to attach to. They just slip away. On the other hand, once you can talk, everything changes. Language is like fuel poured into the memory tank, or like little tags used to sort files. When a 3 or 4-year-old child with a vocabulary of about 5,000 words stands in front of that house, the brain immediately attaches labels. New house, blue door, big tree. By turning images into words, the brain organizes and stores information many times more effectively. But the role of language does not stop at labeling. Learning to speak allows you to do something newborn babies cannot do: tell your story to someone else. Every time you talk about an event from the past, your brain pulls that file out, strengthens the neural connections, and puts it back in the same place more firmly. Think about your grandfather telling the same story from his army days over and over again. He has told it hundreds of times over the years. As a result, that story is carved so deeply into his brain that it is almost impossible to erase. Newborn babies do not have language. They cannot say, "Mom, yesterday I saw a really big dog," because they cannot say it out loud, because they cannot retell it. Their experiences never get reinforced. They slowly sink into silence and fade over time. The close connection between language, storytelling, and memory leads us to one final, extremely interesting discovery. The age of your earliest memory is actually shaped by the culture and society you were born into. Dr. Chi Wang from Cornell University conducted research on different cultural groups and found a clear difference. In Western cultures such as the United States and Europe, individuality is highly valued. Parents there often talk to their children in a way that brings out personal experiences. How did you feel about today's trip? What made you the happiest? They guide children from a very early age in building their own stories. Thanks to this constant practice in storytelling language, Western people on average can remember events from around age 3.5. In the Maori community of New Zealand, where cultural tradition places great importance on oral history, storytelling, and remembering one's origins, the result is even more amazing. Children who grow up in an environment where they are constantly surrounded by oral stories can push their first memories back to around age 2.5. On the other hand, in many East Asian cultures where society often values collectivism and harmony, family conversations tend to focus less on the feelings or personal stories of each individual child. As a result, the brain does not get enough language fuel or enough habit of strengthening events. In these cultures, people's earliest memories often appear later, usually close to age 4 or even after that, before they start becoming clear. That means the moment the movie of your life starts recording depends largely on how the people around you talk to you. So in short, why can't we remember being babies? Now you have the most complete answer. It is not just one single cause. It is a perfect event where many mechanisms happen at the same time. You have temporary memory, but no folder sorting system yet. Your hard drive is constantly being overwritten by a flood of newly born brain cells. So survival skills can take priority. You do not have the vocabulary to package information. And most importantly, you as an independent self have not truly been born yet. All the meaningless, non-essential things we experienced when we were tiny newborns became the first things thrown into the mind's trash bin. It sounds sad that we forever lose the first chapter of our lives, but from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, it was a great sacrifice. That baby's brain was working at full power. It accepted forgetting the tulip in the garden, forgetting the color of the blanket, forgetting the first image of the world so it could pour all its resources into building a solid I. It took itself apart, erased old memory clips one by one, and made room for awareness, language, and self-control. You cannot remember being a baby because that baby did its job perfectly. Its job was to disappear, to make room for the person you are today. If these perspectives gave you a new understanding of yourself, do not forget to hit like and subscribe so you can join Psychology Simplify as we continue decoding the hidden deeper layers of the human mind. And now try digging through the memory fragments you still have left. What is the earliest memory you can truly touch? Have you ever wondered whether it is a real memory or just a story someone told you? Share your experience in the comments below. Thank you for joining Simplify Psychology. Goodbye, and see you again on the next journey of discovery.